With his unfortunate passing a few days ago, we're going to have a brief look at the life and career of US Senator John McCain. Now, he passed away a couple of days ago, just shy of his 82nd birthday, which is very, very sad. But he's an interesting character. He's also known as a Maverick. Well, very well known as a Maverick. Now, he was born on August 29th, 1936, in Panama at the Coco Solo Naval Air Station, which was in the Panama Canal Zone. At the time, Panama had an agreement with the US government, and the US controlled the Panama Canal. They also had many naval air stations and military bases, army bases, to protect it. His father was a naval aviator, like he was. Now, in '51, the family is settled in Virginia, where he goes to school and ends up joining the US Navy himself. By 1958, he's an ensign, and by 1960, he has completed flight school. He's now a fighter pilot and a ground attack pilot. At this time, he is known as a bit of a reckless maverick of an individual, which is something that he will carry through the rest of his life, being called Maverick. He was one of these kind of out there guys. But he did serve on some really important naval aircraft carriers, including the Intrepid and the Enterprise. By 65, he's got married, so the Vietnam War is just starting. He's decided to get married on the July 3rd to his wife, Carol Shep. He was 28 at the time. By the age of 30, the Vietnam War has escalated under President Lyndon Johnson, and he's asking for a combat role, and he is transferred to the USS Forrestal. He's based in the Gulf. He's offshore in the Gulf of Tonkin, flying many flight attack and ground support missions for the Marines and the US Army in Vietnam, and also Rolling Thunder, where they're bombing North Vietnamese industry and military installations in the north half of Vietnam. During his time on the Forrestal, there is the USS Forrestal fire. This is a major incident at the time where 134 sailors are killed. One of the worst naval incidents for the US Navy since World War II. Big loss of life, and he is injured during that when he's trying to help rescue sailors who were trapped and injured during the fire. A bomb in the storage explodes, and he gets covered in shrapnel and blast. So he's got some leg injuries. He's injured. Whilst the Forrestal was out of commission and while he's recovering, he's given his transfer papers to the USS Oriskany, I think is how you pronounce it. He continues in his operations as part of Rolling Thunder. He still continues to fly combat missions. At this time, he's given the Navy Commendation Medal and the Bronze Star for his service so far, and for his efforts on the Forrestal during the Forrestal fire, he's given 2 medals. He's now decorated. Because of his role as a ground attack pilot in Skyhawks and Skyriders, he's flying quite low-level flight missions, and he is shot down in October 1967 over North Vietnam by the North Vietnamese Army, and he is captured. Yeah. Also, during him being shot down, he's also very badly injured when he's captured. The North Vietnamese are treating him brutally. They're refusing medical treatment, and the prisoners he is with think he may not survive long because of his injuries. He loses a lot of weight, his hair goes thin and grey, he's exceptionally ill with fever. By 68, the Vietnamese are now torturing him. The North Vietnamese security forces are torturing him for information because he is an officer. Because of this period, and his father finding out he has been captured, and being known that he's a prisoner of war in North Vietnam, it becomes very public. It goes into the press. The newspapers and the TV stations regularly follow what's going on with John McCain, and it becomes a major sticking point in when they repatriate prisoners. So in 1973, he's repatriated back to the US and has to go into very, very physical physiotherapy to help heal his injuries. Very famous, could no longer put his hands above his head because of the way he was tortured by the North Vietnamese. He stayed with the Navy, and he became a commander, I believe, and he retired in 1981 at a high rank with many medals. So he retired in 81, well decorated and well respected in the Navy. Still known as a bit of a maverick, but a bit more chilled. Because of his injuries, it sticks with him for quite some time, both personally and physically. But so he decides to go into politics, and by 1982 he's now a congressman in Arizona for 2 terms. He will remain a representative of Arizona until his death. He serves Arizona at the state faithfully from 82 until this week just past. In 87, he decides to take the step up from Congress to the Senate in the House of Representatives, and he becomes a senator and serves, I think, 6 terms in the US Senate. for 31 years. He is a senator at a time when Reagan is president, and at this time he's very supportive of Reagan's policies to do with free trade and ending the Cold War and overseas foreign policy. Very, very supportive of some of Reagan's policies, not all, but most. He's a Reagan supporter. George Bush Senior, obviously, during this period there is the first Iraq War, and that there's also an economic downturn in the early 90s, which has an effect. He's very pro these policies. These policies seem not to work in the early 90s, and Bill Clinton is elected president. At the end of Clinton's term, he runs for president. He runs in the Republican primaries. He is defeated in these Republican primaries by future President George W. Bush. He then decides to put his full support behind George W. Bush. And he still remains a very vocal, outspoken senator in Congress, in the House of Representatives, sorry. Very, 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 very brash, known as a maverick. His voting record does bounce around a little bit. One week he'll vote for something, next week he'll vote against the same issue. Hence why he's known as a maverick in this period, as a political maverick, but he will speak his mind. By 2008, the Republicans are losing ground, so to the Democrats, because of the handling of the war on terror, the Iraq War, the Afghan War, and the economic crisis. So he again decides to run for president. He runs in 2008. He wins the Republican primary, so he did better than the time before. And because he's seen as one of the hardcore experience by this point, he's been in politics now for 20 odd years, he's seen as an experienced campaigner. The Republican Party put all their energies behind him, and he comes up short against Barack Obama. It's in Barack Obama's victory and his defeat in the presidential runoff that he shows great contrition and respect for his opponent, amidst some very, 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 very negative questioning from the members of the public and the press. He's very calm and respectful of his opponent. He says, his colour of his skin, his faith has nothing to do with it. I disagree with him on policy. He's a very respected man. He's very famously very, very contrite and respectful in defeat. And he decides to carry on in the Senate House. He could have retired at that point and retired to private life, but he decides to carry on, even though now he's pushing in his early 70s. Obviously, we know about his brain tumour diagnosis and his passing. That's the last bit of his life, the last 13 months. But after Barack Obama's term comes to an end, some in the Republican Party are asking him to run again, and he says no, which leads to Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. When Donald Trump announces he will be running for president, he's starts becoming very vocal against the nominee and then the eventual president. So for the last 3 years of his life, he's been a very vocal opponent of Donald Trump, both his election campaign and then his policies thereafter. And because of the scandal going with Donald Trump, Senator John McCain was exceptionally outspoken at times, and towards the end gained a lot of support for his views against the current presidency. Also, in this time, he's given a lot of speeches on, foreign relations policy, and he's still a very advocate campaigner. Obviously, the last year is taking its toll on his health, but he was still very active until the last few days of his life. He was very, very active in making public appearances and speeches and being involved in policy thought and actively involved in the Senate House. He was known as a maverick. He was a maverick in the US Navy as a naval aviator, and he's been a maverick in politics. But he faithfully served the US state of Arizona from 1982 until his death. Famously, massive sports fan as well, regularly seen at Cardinals and Coyotes games in Arizona. Very, very supportive of the sport in Arizona and growing and youth involvement in sport. Very, very active in Arizona for charity and a champion of the state. Even though he was never actually from Arizona, but he settled in Arizona, made it his home, and I think that's important for the state, some of his time as congressman and senator. There we go, brief overview of the life and career of US Senator John Maverick McCain. Thank you very much for watching. I will go into depth more on the Forrestal Fire at some point, and we will look at the 2008 presidential election and possibly the 2000 presidential election, because he ran in both of them. There's some key points in US history and the world history that John McCain's been involved in. Also, Operation Rolling Thunder, that is a topic of great controversy for both the Vietnamese and the Americans, and he had an involvement in that. Very brave naval aviator. The US Forrestal Fire had an effect on him, and his captivity in Vietnam had an effect on him both physically and mentally that he wore for the rest of his life. Very, very interesting war veteran and political veteran. Thank you very much for watching. I'll have some more videos for you soon, and please like and subscribe.